So, hello everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in to Hacking PM's episode of Breaking into Product Management with Austin Haag. Austin is currently a junior at the University of Michigan, majoring in business and computer science. Austin previously interned as a PM intern with Redfin, and now he's an incoming APM intern with Salesforce. Austin, why don't you just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. Yeah, you covered a lot of it, but I'm a senior at the University of Michigan. I'm doing a 5-year plan with computer science and business. I started with business and then took a computer science course and just fell in love with it. Didn't know what product was until after I started doing it. So my first product internship was at United Health Group, where I was working on a project to help people with substance use disorders, so people who are addicted to alcohol or opioids. Which is obviously a really big problem and really interesting one to work on. And our manager sat us down, like 10 of us around the table on our first day and said, your job is to solve the opioid epidemic. And we're a bunch of interns. And we don't even know what the opioid epidemic is really. But it was pretty exciting to be given like full autonomy and no structure, no roles, just figure it out like to suit you build. So technically, I was actually a software developer for that internship, but wrote fewer than 5 lines of code for sure. And then at the end of the summer, we had a working prototype and had some excitement within the company about it. And my manager was like, "Good job as our PM." And I was like, "What's a PM?" So that's how I first got into products. I went back a second summer to help make sure that the full product roadmap was actually implemented. I learned there's a difference between getting hype about a product and actually making it happen. And then from there, just kept getting more excited about products. So my third summer, so this is after my junior year, this past summer I worked for Redfin in Seattle, which is the tech-based real estate company. They help you buy and sell homes. And that's where I had some really great formal training in PM, just fell in love with it even more. And then now I'm working at Salesforce this upcoming summer, also as an APM, which I'm really excited about too. And then outside of products, I'm on the sailing team here at Michigan. I used to be a captain of the team. I was involved with some of the leadership that governs college sailing. And I love playing guitar and actually just got a piano, so pretty excited to start learning that too.
So that's great, Austin. Thank you very much for telling us about yourself. And the interesting thing about Austin is actually I've known Austin since I was a junior in college, and after Austin's first internship at the health company, he reached out to me and asked about product management. So Austin, why don't you talk a little bit about that stage where you didn't really know where product management was, you weren't really a software engineering intern at your company, so how'd you go about, who'd you end up talking to, what was helpful? Would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so it was absolutely people like you that taught me what product was. I basically decided I know I want to do this, but I don't know anything about it, so I got to start just asking around. So just reaching out to peer advisors in the business school, or just anyone who I knew was interested in business and tech, because sometimes it was even tough to figure out who are the PMs. But once I started talking to you and another guy named Jordan Katz, once you start talking to one, you hear names of the others, and then I just kept asking a lot of questions. Probably annoyed them a lot with my ignorance about everything, but just was really excited to learn more. So most of it was through interaction with students, and then I didn't actually get any formal PM training until I worked for Redfin, which is my third PM internship. Yeah.
Got it. So a lot of people actually, I think a lot of people really struggle with just kind of cold emailing and reaching out to people. Can you talk to us a little bit about that experience and what was helpful with you?
Yeah, definitely. You hear this advice all the time, but just finding one point of commonality. So for example, being at Michigan or in the business school, sometimes I found a member in the sailing community. So just finding one thing you have in common and then sending a message on LinkedIn and just making that present. And then the big thing is once I started talking to one person, that unlocked the doors for everyone else. And at the end of most of my interviews, I would ask, this is super valuable. Here are all the things I've learned from you. I'd love to know if you have anyone else who might offer another perspective that would be valuable. And then usually at the end of each interview, just casual discussion I had with someone, I got 2 or 3 more people, and then I could say, "Hey, Philip recommended that I reach out to you." And then once you have a name attached to it, that gets an even higher response rate. But I definitely had very many messages that just were left unread, and I had to just kind of accept that as part of the process.
Got it. Okay, so what was the factor that really drew you to being wanting to do product management instead of software engineering? Because I know a lot of people really struggle with that.
Yeah, the way it was described to me and how I generally understand it is there's like being on a software team is like being involved in a wheel. So there's like one spoke of the wheel is a software developer, one is the designer, one is user researcher, etc. And the product manager is in the center of the wheel. Or another way I've heard it being described as being a product manager is like being the CEO of a product without the authority of a CEO. And so that excited me to just be involved in kind of all these different things because I was really interested in design, and I started in business and then found out I love tech, and I just wanted to do it all. And then product just basically does a lot of everything. So that was really exciting. And then the other thing that I learned eventually is that oftentimes it's the product manager who's leading the discussion about what the product should actually be and what it should do. Like some companies are more engineering driven, some are more product driven. Products can be part of the engineering depending on the company. But what I found is that I wanted to be part of the one making the decision about how it actually works and how it should be designed. I didn't want to miss that design element. I realized if I was a software developer, I might be handed a spec and just be told, do it this way. We've put a lot of thought into it. And that's just not really like something that I could see myself doing all the time because I am a very opinionated person and like to be part of the discussion before decisions are made.
Now that you knew you wanted to do product management after your first internship, how did you go out preparing and finding Redfin, ended up getting to that internship, and how did you prepare for that?
Yeah, well, the Bible of product management, like cracking the PM interview, is one of the books that I read. And actually just reading that book started several conversations. Like I recommend reading that book in public. It's branded so well that I had people come up to me like in a park and be like, "Are you interested in product?" Like I'm a product manager at Google. Be like, "This is crazy." So that was one of the way, and just definitely networking a lot. I probably did fewer practice interviews than you'd expect from a product manager. I focused a lot on doing things. That was one of the biggest pieces of advice from Jordan, is just like, it doesn't really matter if your background is in computer science in terms of like your education, whether you're a computer science degree or a business degree or whatever it is, psychology doesn't matter. If you've actually just built products and like get actual experience. If you want to learn the best way to design something, make a crappy product and then get feedback on it. And then like, that's so much more interesting. Like personally, practice interviews are like super high level mock, which don't get me wrong, it's very important to learn how to interview and how to speak. But what really sets you apart in the interviews is not your interview abilities, but how like the actual content of your answers. So I think that you get through practice, and you can do that on your own. So I made a couple of apps just for fun. I took a iOS coding course online through Codecademy or something like that. It was Udemy, that's it. And I just did that during the school year, just found some time on the side and just really enjoyed that. And then made a couple apps that I thought were really good and then no one else cared about, but I learned a lot about what people care about through that. And just like going through the process made me feel a lot more competent technically. Like even though I'm a computer science dual degree, I still feel like business is kind of my home. So pursuing projects where I'd really have to dive into the technicals and like do it myself was really valuable too. And then like Redfin, for example, I actually knew nothing about the company. When I applied, I saw it on my career site and just thought, I just need to submit as many apps as possible. Even after having 2 product internships, they're informal product internships, but product internships nonetheless. I must have submitted at least 50 apps that fall, and Redfin was the first and only offer I got and accepted. So a lot of it was just like maintaining faith. Like I had conversations with the career office here at Michigan. They said, product management is really tough to get into. Like, what's your plan B? And I was like, well, maybe consulting. They're like, that's not a plan B. So I ended up having plan A was products, plan B was consulting, plan C was marketing. Plan D was like reach out to small companies and find some kind of work to do. But another piece of advice I got early on from, I can't remember who, but it was basically just fully commit to what you want until you can't anymore. Like once it's really pressure time that like you need to look at your plan B, then do that, but don't let go of your plan A just because it's difficult. Because if you do, then you'll definitely not get it, and it's not really worth your time. So I just stayed really committed to it and just kept filling out applications nonstop. And then obviously after that, then it's all the stuff you've done to prepare once you get the interviews. But I think I only interviewed with like 4 companies after applying to like 50. With like a pretty good GPA and like pretty involved. There's just so many people applying to product jobs that you just like you can't take personally.
So what do you think happened where you only got 4 out of 50 responses? And then why do you think you ended up getting Redfin? Because it's super competitive.
Yeah, I was asking myself that a lot. I think part of why I wasn't getting responses from the places I didn't is because I didn't have a strong like personal connection with the company, which I got super lucky with Redfin to submit an app without a referral and actually have it be looked at. And so if I were to go back, I would actually spend more time on fewer companies to make sure I had a really good connection. I had referrals from some of the big ones, but I was a sophomore, and it's really tough to get an internship after your sophomore summer. So I think just having more personal connections and focusing more on that ahead of time, like start recruiting in August. I think that was my other mistake because I was submitting a lot of these apps pretty late. And by the time I was submitting them, I think a lot of them were already full and they just hadn't closed them yet. So that was another issue. And then to answer the second part of your question about how did it work at Redfin, I did a lot of research into the company once I got the interview. Even the first one, I spent probably 15 hours looking at the business model, and I looked at it with a really critical lens. Like I came up with a lot of things that I thought were problems with it. I was very transparent with the people I was interviewing with. Like, these are the things I'm excited about. Like, this part seems wrong. Like, I'm obviously much less informed about the company than those who are inside, but they're really excited to hear that outside feedback, and that's why they're hiring an intern in the first place, is they want like another opinion. So I think that really impressed them, and just like, I made it so clear how badly I wanted it. Like I walked into every interview just like very excited to be there because I genuinely was, because I like submitted so many apps that it was just kind of a relief to be there. And then also just the like learning a lot about the company culture was really important. Redfin and a lot of companies who are hiring PMs there's so many candidates who are completely qualified to be a PM. So they're not just hiring on technical capabilities. So like Redfin, for example, you could be the best coder, the best PM in the world, but if you don't align with their values, they're not going to hire you. And one question that I thankfully asked in the interview that I think really helped, which I'm realizing more and more in retrospect, is I asked every person who interviewed me, which of the values at Redfin is most salient to you in your everyday life? And then I shared with them what the other interviewers had said too. And by chance, all of them had given similar answers, and like that was important to me too, because that showed me that they were genuine. So that I think also probably set me apart in my interviews.
Now, can you talk a little bit about what your Redfin internship was actually like?
Yeah, well, it was amazing. I don't know if you can see this, but that's my Redfin Huck Finn Ultimate Frisbee disc there that my team gave me. And I think this is a really good example of just how like personal and friendly everyone is there. They all wrote like little notes to me about like their time with me that summer. So that means a lot to me. So I guess I'll start with just the family element of Redfin. I noticed that on day one. Like a lot of times in your first day, whether it's school or a job, you're wondering like, where am I going to sit at lunch? Like, where even is lunch? Like, who are the people around me? And no way I'm going to remember any of their names. But I just remember having like engineers, designers, just like everyone coming up and introducing themselves to me, like proactively. I had messages waiting on my laptop of like, welcome to Redfin, I interviewed you, or like, I'm friends with a friend who knows you. Like, it was very personal. And like had people like escorting me to lunch, just like with the team. Another thing that I think really contributes to the family culture at Redfin and other companies who are both small and offer like the nice tech perks like free lunch, is that actually creates a family culture. Like, I didn't expect that to be so important to me, that lunch is provided by the company. Redfin caters a couple of days a week, depending on the location between Seattle and SF, but both of them have catered lunches where all of the employees will go and eat lunch together. So I just found that a really natural way to talk to my coworkers about things other than work, because it wasn't a meeting. So I got to be good friends with the other interns and the full-time people there, which was really cool. So like when I think back to Redfin, I think about the people first, for sure. And then in terms of the product experience, it was also really incredible. They had very high expectations of interns. For example, the first spec I worked on was basically due within the first 2 or 3 weeks, because they had an engineer ready to work on it full time at that point. Like, it was already in the schedule. They hadn't met me yet. They just expected that the spec would be good and ready to go. And like, I was working with real like full-time projects with full-time employees. So that was like a lot of autonomy. And like, even after 2 product internships, it was pretty terrifying. Like, it felt like I was doing everything for the first time, because this was like real product management. My manager was a PM and my mentor was a PM. And those 2 also offered like so much guidance. Like, I consider communication to be one of my strengths, like giving presentations. But then like after my first presentation, my manager like really respectfully sat me down and gave the most detailed like presentation feedback I'd received in my entire life. Just like from how to format the slides to like different ways to phrase things, like just their attention to detail was really helpful for me, because I'm always looking for real feedback, like intense feedback. So I definitely got that at Redfin. And then to talk a little bit more about the product experience, I just got to work on so many important projects, and I had autonomy over what those projects were too. So I created 3 specs for the company. The first spec I finished in the first 2 weeks, and when I talked to my manager at the start of the summer, she said, like, what kind of size of projects would you like? And I said, I don't know, I'd like to do something that's really important and also something where I can see the full product cycle. And those are obviously really conflicting. Like, the bigger the project, the less likely you are to see it through to completion in an internship. But like, they did a really good job of planning that too. So my first project, I was able to go from just an idea through the design phase, writing a spec, through development, which is about 3 weeks, and then alpha tests of a week, and then a beta test of 2 weeks, and then releasing it nationally, all within the internship. So that was pretty incredible to get that experience. Like, really put the whole product management picture together for me, because I hadn't had a chance to go like step by step through the whole thing before. And then my other 2 projects were a lot bigger scale. It was involved a lot more interviews with real estate agents and with customers. Like, just talking to my mom, even like, how would you feel if your real estate agent was doing this to your saved searches, things like that. So just really involved products that involved a lot more scoping and prioritization, which is the toughest and probably the most important job of a product manager, is just like relentlessly cutting down on the most important issues. So I got a lot of good practice with that. With my second product, which is still in development, so I can't talk too much about it, I ended up in a room with a whiteboard, locking myself there for like 6 hours, and I had Post-it notes all over the walls of all of the different potential features, and just trying to figure out what's an MVP that makes sense and will have nice next steps for the company after that first MVP. So it was just a ton of commitment and energy, but also really good balance in my life too. Like, I talked about that family thing. People worked 9 to 5, like, really, and like, I would go and play Ultimate Frisbee after. So it was like, I'd go to work and it was like intense. Everyone was really driven. Everyone was doing their jobs better and like more impressive than I could imagine myself doing. So it was like a really motivating environment, and then could actually just be friends with them after work and hang out. And it really felt like a family. And I was like very emotional leaving at the end of the summer. So I got to do some really cool things on the product side and just met some amazing people who I was actually like talking with earlier today. So like, keeping up the connections has been really like awesome too.
Completely agree with you though, Austin. That sounds like a great internship. I know culture is super important to me. One of the reasons I picked Microsoft was because I just really liked everyone the day of my interview versus some of the other companies. I ended up like canceling interviews just because I didn't like the people as much. And I think that's a really important thing that a lot of people underestimate. Now, I know we already kind of talk about this, so let's keep this short, but do you want to touch on a bit like recruiting after Redfin? The last two things I would love to hear about is just your recruiting process, getting Salesforce APM, and then why you decided not to go back to Redfin and why you decided to work for Salesforce.
Right. So once you have one real products internship, it's so much easier and so much less stressful. I was fortunate enough to get a return offer from Redfin formally for an next internship, and pretty likely when I graduate too. And again, just going back to how genuine they were, like they encouraged me to actually go and explore another internship. And I could bring it back to Redfin if I decide it's the best place for me, which is like still pretty likely. I have high hopes for Salesforce too. But so the first thing I could do in the fall after the Redfin internship is just really narrow my focus. Whereas I applied to like 50 companies with Redfin, or before the Redfin internship, I applied, I think, to somewhere around 5 or 10 companies for this fall. And I had that Redfin deadline to decide that definitely pushed me and pushed the other companies to accelerate things. I think one thing that you really helped me with was, for example, when I interviewed with Microsoft, I was really disappointed because they set my interview for the end of November, which was after my Redfin deadline, even though I shared with them that I had this deadline. But then you just had me really advocate for moving it earlier. And then they did. So they made it happen and moved my interview up like 2 months, which is like really nice. And then with Salesforce, similar deal, they just had a much faster timeline. So I was deciding between a Microsoft offer and a Salesforce offer basically mid-October with a deadline of around November 1st. So it's definitely much earlier. I actually didn't get my Redfin internship until the offer until right around Thanksgiving the previous year. So definitely spent a lot less time recruiting and with many fewer companies, which also meant I really spent more time on each of those companies, and I think I was a lot more prepared for them. Google was really frustrating in terms of the timeline, which they always are, because they have a very strict process with how they do it, which I respect. But I heard back from them about my next interview. Just like 3 hours, I accepted Salesforce, and I didn't want to renege on Salesforce, and I was really happy with it anyway. But so I definitely had a lot more to speak about in my interviews. I had a better resume after the Redfin internship, and a lot more directions personally for which companies I wanted. So all of those things I think helped get a much higher response rate from companies. And then ultimately to have an offer between Microsoft and Salesforce, I was really excited about.
No, that's great, Austin. And I think you touched on a lot of great things that are going to help a ton of people that not necessarily a lot of the other people I've talked to have gone in depth in, especially because you haven't necessarily gotten your full-time offer yet. So you could end up a lot of different places. So we'll talk again when that happens. The last question I have for you is the same thing I ask everyone, but is there anything you know now that you wish you knew 2-3 years ago or even last year?
It's a very good question. I could list 1,000,001 things, so I'll try to choose my favorite. Honestly, I think it's pretty cliche, but just that like it'll work out. Like I was much less stressed this semester, but my stress level when I was recruiting for the first like real product internship or like formal product internship was just very high. And like that entire semester is just a blur. And I wish that I had confidence that it would work, whether it was for product or for something else. Because I think during that time, I spent so much energy on recruiting that like some of my friendships distanced, and it was tough to like maintain my commitments to my other clubs. So like just remembering that everything's in perspective and that you only need one offer to actually work out for it to be a great summer. Like I had no expectations of the Redfin internship going as well as it did. And just like knowing that then that sometimes like the unexpected things will work out really well. And just to be, I guess the second part of that then is just to be excited about the big companies, the big names, like the FAMGA, all the ones that everyone already knows, but also like really look into the smaller ones too, because those can be like really rewarding experiences where you might have more impacts on the company as a whole, and like you never know how it's going to work out. So I think generally my advice to myself would just be like, don't stress out quite as much and focus on like what I could do in the moment and just be satisfied with that.
No, that's a great answer, Austin. I don't think anyone shared that before. I completely agree with you. I also stressed myself out a ton. But thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me today. I think everything you said was super helpful, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.